On November 14th, 2011, a mapper called Nakagawa Cannon, also known as DKSSLQJ, submitted his map of a song charted in several rhythm games such as Beatmania 2DX. The set contained 5 difficulties going for approval, 3 Taiko difficulties along with Another and 4 Dimensions, rated 4.65 and 5.0 stars in old difficulty respectively. How difficulty used to be calculated prior to PVV2 is a whole other can of worms I'm not going to open yet, but all you need to know is that star rating was capped at 5, so the final difficulty was 5 out of 5 stars hard. The description of the map reads, "I can't pass this map. Another, fun and playable. 4 Dimensions, hell diff. This is easy diff, but hell difficult. Real stream." Freedom Dive as a set would become synonymous with the long streams and stamina, which is evident just by looking at the map, but also the reading difficulty, awkward to aim patterns, and spacing that builds in the end. All of that together is what makes it one of the hardest maps in the game, especially at the time. The biggest question left after the submission was, can anyone even do this map? Before the map was even ranked, it began to gain notoriety as one of the most difficult challenges the game had to offer, with many top players testing their skill on it. Standing out from everyone else were CookieZ and Nico, who had arguably the best stamina of the time, which would be needed for the death streams contained in the second half. By the end of February 2012, CookieZ had already uploaded a live play to YouTube showing amazing accuracy and a crazy combo held until the very end, where he lost finger control and gave up. He had also shown his ability with several no-fail scores and an eventual pass on the map before it was ranked, with an accuracy as high as 96.19%. It's hard to track down any other improvements in score before the map was ranked, since there's no leaderboard, but that would all change on June 23, 2012, when it was finally approved. Initially, the leaderboard was almost entirely dominated by halftime scores, since the map was of such extreme difficulty. There were a few no-mod passes, but there were only Ds, Cs, and the occasional B. It took just about 4.5 months for a no-mod score to top the leaderboard, and surprising no one, it was CookieZ with a 93.83% 13 miss pass that blew all the other scores away just due to combo. The coming weeks would see some new faces crop up like Varuchi with a 95.64% 21 miss and an incredible 98.13% 8 miss from Nico, who would give CookieZ a run for his money. These scores showed that Freedom Dive was possible and maybe even FCable with high accuracy, but they weren't able to keep a high combo, which is what kept CookieZ's score at number 1 for the time being. Just after the start of the new year, something remarkable would happen. On January 2nd, 2013, CookieZ tried his hand once again at the map. Everyone knew that CookieZ could improve his score since even his passes from nearly a year prior had higher accuracy, but I'm not sure that anyone was prepared for how much this score was about to be improved. Showing his dominance, which would be on full display throughout the rest of 2013, CookieZ achieved the first ever full combo on Freedom Dive with 98.49% accuracy, absolutely demolishing everyone else. Another one of the hardest maps in the entire game ended up being FC'd for the first time by none other than the legend himself only a half a year after the map was added to the rank section. Many people aren't aware of this first FC on Freedom Dive though, because CookieZ set a much more famous score on the same map only 30 days later. February 1st, 2013 saw a score so unbelievably ahead of its time that it's still talked about to this day. CookieZ's 99.97% FC on Freedom Dive. Hitting only a single 100 in the entire map, CookieZ was only milliseconds off from setting a perfect no-mod score on a map renowned as a challenge that even the best players had struggled on. He made it seem effortless, passing every other top player on the map and doing it almost robotically. CookieZ had just FC'd something no one else was even close to doing, twice. Around this time, many top players including Varuchi and Nico would improve their scores, but they were nowhere near what he was able to do. CookieZ would come back to the map and did several attempts with Hard Rock and Hidden Hard Rock, but wasn't able to pull off anything notable. Months passed and the score stood. That was, at least until one day, it disappeared. November 11th, 2013 was the day that CookieZ quit the game and was banned. With the best player the game had ever seen being banned, the leaderboard on this iconic map was set back since all of his scores were now wiped. Of course, the map's reputation and difficulty remained and even strengthened as a race between players to see who could fill CookieZ's shoes on the map ensued. Without an FC, and certainly no one even remotely close to the accuracy CookieZ had, the leaderboard was now topped with a 96.26% 8 miss from Marucci, which didn't even reach half combo. Wobbuffel soon after topped that number one with a much lower accuracy but higher combo 93.02% 23 miss that would make players have to push for greater combo plays if they wanted a shot at the number one. Marucci, trying to reclaim his number one spot, was able to push the record much closer to where it had been before with a 98.04% 2-miss choke right towards the ending of the map in January of 2014. Motivation unfaltering, he continued to push his limits until on May 5th, 2014, Marucci finally became the second person ever to FC Freedom Dive with 97.57% accuracy. Despite the incredible accomplishment, he knew he could push his accuracy farther and would continue to try, but would be interrupted by a newcomer to the scene. Captain XN had slowly been working his way up the leaderboard of Freedom Dive over the course of the past few months, and he had shown incredible accuracy in some of his attempts. He had even managed to place number 2 on the map around the time of Marucci's FC, so it was definitely something that was doable with enough time and effort, which he was inspired to put in by Marucci. And after much effort and only 6 days after Marucci's FC, Captain XN would FC as well with 99.23%, placing him as the new number one, the closest anyone had gotten to CookieZ's record yet. Freedom Dive finally had multiple FCs on the leaderboard for the first time ever, showing just how much top players as a whole were improving. Wanting that number one spot more than anything else, Marucci spent the next few days trying to re-FC the map with higher accuracy to beat Captain XN. With hundreds of spectators watching him play in-game, Marucci kept playing and playing until he set his highest score yet, a 98.55% 2 miss, which overwrote his FC. The misses were actually on purpose. Marucci had stopped playing for the last 2 notes since he dropped his accuracy and thought he could top it again, but he never ended up doing so. In a strange twist of events, Captain XN was now the only FC on the leaderboard, and his accuracy would secure his number one spot for an extremely long time. With the map FC'd Nomad multiple times for more than a year, people wondered if there was anyone who could play the map with mods, and their answer came when CookieZ began streaming in summer of 2015. He seemed a bit rusty, but was still incredible at the game and was sure to improve if he kept playing, but he was still banned, so there would be no official online records for him until then. Days passed, weeks passed, months passed, but not much new. New faces would appear on the map's ranking, but no one would see an FC until Rafis joined the club and then got a very high combo attempt with Hard Rock all the way in September. And then possibly the greatest news of the decade, CookieZ had finally been unbanned on November 23, 2015, but all of his scores had been wiped and he would have to play completely fresh. Many pestered him constantly to try out Freedom Dive because of his insane Nomad FC and solid HR and HDHR runs from 2013, and he would make it a goal of his to try and FC it once more. He would attempt it on stream many times, but the best score he could set was a 96.87% 6 miss with Hidden Hard Rock near the end of 2015. A little over 6 weeks after his unban, CookieZ was playing Freedom Dive with Hard Rock as part of his usual attempts, and he pulled off a jaw-dropping score in true CookieZ fashion. Where many had tried but were barely able to get higher than 97% with Hard Rock before, CookieZ showed once again who the true number one of this map is, with a 99.13% FC, almost matching Captain XN's AC, but with Hard Rock on top. The first modded FC had finally come, and he once again lived up to his true legend of completely decimating the leaderboard in the process. No one would be able to top this score for a very long time, just because of how ahead of his peers CookieZ was at the stream aiming and stamina skill set. I'd like to take a minute to mention another accomplishment on this map, which took place a little bit lower on the leaderboard. Since the map was first ranked basically, people were trying to go for easy mod plays, which proved to be extremely difficult due to the spacing, stamina, and of course the density. GN was the first easy S rank on the map with a 98.55% slider break near the end, which even with the 0.5 times score multiplier placed him at number 5 on the map in late December 2015. He would try and did actually achieve the very first Easy FC soon after with 98.02 and a couple of slider ends dropped in the process. I also want to highlight Mafim, who later in August 2016 beat GN's accuracy and pulled off the second Easy FC with 99.87% accuracy. Go check out these plays if you haven't before. It's mind-boggling how dedicated and skilled these easy plays are, and it's hard to understand how impressive they are until you see them. Back to the main story. Cookie Z held number 1 with this Hard Rock FC for months, and it didn't look like anyone else was going to be getting another modded FC anytime soon. Firebat92, known as Angel Megumin at the time, was one of the first Hard Rock passes apart from Cookie Z to make it to the top 50, but he had 97.90%, 9 misses, and barely over 1,000 combo. Since he had already done it with Hard Rock, Cookie Z took the next logical step and was attempting the map with Hidden Hard Rock as his next goal. As anyone who's played weird Space Stream Aim before can tell you, Hard Rock is one thing, but Hidden is a completely different beast. Luckily, Cookie Z was one of the best Hidden players of all time, especially for this specific skill set, and he was pretty much exclusively playing with Hidden at this time. On September 20th, 2016, he was playing the usual maps for his stream when he decided to go for some runs on Freedom Dive. Nothing was out of the ordinary in the beginning, but it became apparent that this run was very different by the end of the middle section. Holding FC right then with Hidden Hard Rock, he also had unbelievable accuracy and continued on building his combo in the hardest to keep up with part of the map and even started shaking until it happened. On this day, Cookie Z achieved a Hidden Hard Rock FC on Freedom Dive with 99.83% accuracy. It placed number 1 on the leaderboard and also was the first 800 PP score in the entire game, which propelled him to the new number 1 global ranking position. It's hard to understate the importance and insanity of this single score where Cookie Z was able to pull off a HDHR FC before anyone else could even FC with a single mod. This score is considered by many to be the single best score ever achieved in the game's history, and without a doubt, it is probably now the most famous score ever as well. In only 5 years, Freedom Dive 4 Dimensions went from an unranked map which barely anyone could do, to a map with a pretty much unbeatable Hidden Hard Rock FC on top of the leaderboard. And despite almost exactly 4 years passing between that day and the uploading of this video, that's pretty much the end of the story when it comes to Freedom Dive for now. In the years since, several players have stepped up and been able to FC with Hard Rock like Farvalian, Abyssal, BTMC, and Abraham R, and even a Hidden FC was pulled off by Okinamo. But even now, no one is even close to matching or beating his score. Freedom Dive is one of the most iconic maps in the entirety of OS and has been a go-to challenge map since even before the day it was ranked. It has been incredible watching as players evolve and improve over time as they take on one of the most difficult to master maps in the game. Maybe soon we will see another incredible score on this map that will keep the legacy going. Until then, this has been the story of Freedom Dive 4 Dimensions.